Now let's get back here to Israel, a little politics and a little diplomacy. As we've been reporting, Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan will take over in New York City soon as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations and also to Washington, but that's a different story. But there is still some business left to tend to for the current envoy to the UN, Danny Danon. And he's got some pressing matters involving neighboring threats and, of course, the early fallout from Israel's plans to apply sovereignty to parts of the West Bank, the historical Jewish homeland of Judea and Samaria. Our senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim spoke with the often outspoken Danon.
Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, joining us from New York City. Thank you for the time. Your tenure as ambassador to the United Nations will come to an end shortly. We heard the announcement this week that Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan will do a little bit of double dipping at the UN and in Washington after the November elections as a new ambassador from Israel. What are some of your thoughts as you prepare to leave the United Nations on your tenure there?
And I think today we are starting to see the fruits of our bilateral relations in the multilateral arena. So many times we speak about our innovation, technology, and now we can see that actually we see the votes changing at the UN. And I would advise my friend Gilad, when he comes in, to think high. We can do everything at the UN. It's challenging, but we are a strong country which is well respected at the UN today.
It's an interesting arrangement that Minister Erdan will be facing both in Washington and New York. That has not happened for an Israeli ambassador in 60-some years now. Is this too much for Gilad Erdan? I mean, to have two plates that full, both in New York and Washington, can one person hold two jobs at the same time like that?
Well, I can tell you that, being the Israeli ambassador to the UN, it's more than a full-time position. We work day and night. We have a small team of dedicated diplomats, and we are working very hard. And I know that you will have to cover DC, but it will be only for a short period of time, for about 10 months. So I'm sure you will do it also. But at the end of the day, when you come to the UN, you have to be there. You have to be involved in every decision. You have to gather information. And I think you will find it to be a fascinating and challenging position.
Diplomacy is a much different venue from what you came from and also what Minister Erdan is coming from as well. If you can relay some advice to your successor, what would be some of the things and maybe you already have, but what would be some of the things that you would tell him, A, that are going to surprise him, and B, just some general advice that says, hey, this is how you get situated here. This is how you make inroads. This is how diplomacy is done. At least that's what me, Danny Danon, learned in my 5 years at the UN.
So I'm willing to help my successor and to show him some of the things that we achieved. And my advice is to believe that everything is possible and to speak with everybody. Many times I was able to promote our agenda with countries that we do not have diplomatic relations. I was able to promote important moves for Israel with those ambassadors. So we shouldn't speak only with our allies and our friends, that's obvious, but we should also reach out to those that still don't work with us publicly.
Something that could very well come up at the UN in the next couple of weeks is the issue of Israel applying sovereignty, or some would say annexation of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. There are already threats emanating from France and the European Union of possible sanctions on Israel if the country goes ahead with these plans that the government is making. This has been a topic that has come up time and time again at the UN, but it seems like it's getting serious at this point. It's not just an election ploy anymore. It's actually part of the government agenda. What are your plans in these last few weeks, and what are you hearing going around the UN right now in terms of a possible action against Israel if the country moves ahead with these plans?
So definitely we hear those voices. The Arab League met. We see activities coming from some of the Arab missions here at the UN. But at the end of the day, this is a decision of the Israeli government, period. We are the one to decide whether to apply sovereignty or not. And I want to remind everybody that when Menachem Begin, our late prime minister, decided to apply sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which was also liberated in 1967, many people condemned Israel. I think also the US, they were not happy about it. But at the end of the day, people accepted it. And look what's happening today on the Golan Heights. how beautiful, how stable it is, and look what's happening in Syria. So we should take the right decision for us, and then we can deal with the outcome in the international environment.
Busy days ahead at the United Nations in terms of Israel and the rest of the Middle East. Thanks as always for your time.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Well, Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, that is no easy job.